guys, welcome back. I hope you had a great weekend. So let's get this week started. Please take out a fresh sheet of paper for some brand new notes. And our title for today is the unit circle. So what exactly is the unit circle? So let's do this. So on your paper, like in the middle, draw a really big circle. And then try to locate the center of your circle and put a point there. Now what I want you to do is draw a line that goes up and down and sideways through the center of your circle. Okay, so it wasn't perfect, but it communicates the idea. Now here's what we're trying to establish. In math class, the word unit means one. So this circle that you're looking at is a circle whose radius has a length of 1. So that being said, I think you would all agree with me that if this is the origin and the radius is 1, then the coordinates of this point would be, in like fashion, this one here would be 0, 1. Also, this one here would be at -1, 0. And of course, this one here would be at 0, -1. Now, what about the angles? Let's go through and label some of the angles. Do you guys remember how that the way you measure angles is you start like this here and you move counterclockwise? So if I wanted to go to this one, for instance, that would of course be 90 degrees. If I wanted to go over here, I'd have to rotate how many angles, guys? How many degrees, rather? I'd have to go 180. And this one down here would be 270. And this one here would be 360. But remember that 360 is the same as 0 degrees. But then I would remind you guys that we can measure angles not just in degrees, but also in radians, where 90 degrees is the same as pi over 2, 180 is pi, 270 is 3 pi over 2, and this one is 2 pi, but again 2 pi is the same as just 0 radians. So these are the north, east, south, and west locations for the unit circle. However, are there other points that we are interested in? The answer, of course, is yes. For instance, what about this point right here? Watch. What about this one here? I want to know the coordinates of that point right there. Now let's just assume that it's halfway between 0 and 90. So of course, halfway between 0 and 90 implies that that is 45 degrees. So we know that that's 45 degrees, but gosh darn it, I want the coordinates. Now before we find the coordinates, I remind you that unit is 1. Now the radius of 1 can go in any direction. It doesn't have to just go straight up or down or left or right. It can go off at an angle. So what I'm trying to say is that if I make this solid, that's 1 because it's a radius of a circle, of that unit circle. And now what if I do this? What if I just go like this? Watch. Let me just go straight down, and then let me get this red marker, and let me just put a little baby box. Now, I think you guys would believe me if I told you that if this is 45, then that's also 45. So we have a 45, 45, 90. So what I want to do now is to take a time out so that I could find the length of the sides of that triangle. So, time out. All right, so let me give myself a little tattoo here. A right triangle that looks something like this. And let's say that this was the right angle here. Now we know that the hypotenuse on the unit circle, the hypotenuse was 1. We know that this is a 45, 90. I think we're all in agreement that the legs would be the same. We have an isosceles triangle. That means that the legs are the same. So let's pick a letter from the alphabet. How about the letter Q? So we can call this Q here, and we can call this Q. Can you guys see this? So this is what we have here. I want to know what the Q's are. So it is a right triangle, so let's go Pythagorean Theorem. We can go Q squared plus Q squared equals 1 squared. Q squared plus Q squared equals 1 squared. Now what's Q squared plus Q squared? That would be 2Q squared equals 1. I can now divide both sides by 2 so that Q squared equals 1/2. Now to get Q alone, I have to do what to both sides? I have to square root. So I have to square root this, I have to square root that. So on this side, it's just Q equals. Now if you type this into a Casio, it's going to say this. Watch, it's going to say square root 2 over 2. So that means that this is square root 2 over 2, and this one is square root 2 over 2. This is going to help us in our unit circle. So time out, over, time in. So we just saw that here we have coordinates of square root 2 over 2, square root 2 over 2. And really, this plays the role of the x coordinate because you move sideways, and this is the role of the y coordinate. So we have just found the coordinates of that mysterious point. And we already knew that it was located at 45 degrees. And if you were to turn degrees into radians, 45 degrees is the same as pi over 4. Well, if you know this one, then you know this one, because really they have the same numbers. It's just that this point has an x coordinate that is negative, but everything else stays the same. And you know what? If you know this one, then you know this one. And in this location here, both of the numbers would be negative because you're in quadrant 3. And we also know this one. And here the x is positive and the y is negative. This one would be 135. This would be 225. And this would be 315. In terms of radians, this one would be 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, and 7 pi over 4. Now, are there other points on the unit circle that we are interested in? And the answer is yes. And I'll use green to highlight those other points. We want to know what this is and this one. We also want this one and this one, along with this one and that one. And we want this one. And finally, we are also interested in this one. Now, just for the sake of time, we're not going to do that here now, because to find the information for all of these newer points, it requires a procedure like we did earlier today. So we don't have to do all that because you guys know how to find those numbers. So instead, here's what we're going to do. What I want you to do for your exit ticket is basically just to copy this down all over again, brand new from scratch. How am I expecting you to find the information for these points here? Google. Just go to Google. Just go online and type in unit circle, and you'll have like a billion search results, all of which have pictures that show all the missing information for this unit circle. Tomorrow, we will look at how to use the unit circle. But for today, I just wanted to introduce you guys to the unit circle. And for your exit ticket, I want you just to copy it down on a fresh sheet of paper from the internet. So having said all that, try the attached exit ticket, and we'll play more tomorrow.